What if I told you that vampires are real? Not the vampires you see in movies, the real ones, the ones that terrified entire villages for centuries. And what if I told you that the fear of vampires wasn't just superstition, it was science, just misunderstood? In 1725, a man named Peter Plogojowitz died in a small village in Serbia. He was buried like anyone else, but his neighbors weren't convinced he was gone. 10 days after his funeral, they dug him up. His skin was fresh, his mouth was open, and there was blood at his lips. They didn't see a corpse, they saw a vampire. They staked him through the heart, then they burned him. And they weren't the first. The belief in blood-drinking demons predates Dracula by thousands of years. In ancient Mesopotamia, 4,000 years ago, people feared the Edimu, vampire-like spirits that rose from the dead. The Assyrians and Babylonians wrote about them on clay tablets. In Greece and Rome, similar creatures haunted the night. The Jewish Talmud told of Lilith, Adam's first wife, who became a monster roaming the darkness. Every culture, it seems, independently invented vampires, and they all shared one thing in common. They were trying to explain death. But here's the problem. Death is messy. Today, we understand decomposition. We know what happens to a body after it's buried. But ancient people didn't have that knowledge. All they had was observation, and what they observed was terrifying. When a body decomposes, gases build up inside. The corpse bloats and the skin tightens. Blood sometimes pushes out of the mouth and nose, staining the lips. To someone who didn't understand this, it looked like the corpse had been feeding, like it had risen from the grave to drink blood. So they dug it up, they burned it, they did whatever they could to stop it. But it wasn't just decomposition. Disease played a massive role in the vampire myth. When plagues swept through medieval Europe, many villages were wiped out. People didn't understand germs or contagion. All they knew was that death was following them. Around 2009, archaeologists discovered a vampire burial in Venice. A woman was buried with a brick wedged into her mouth, a common anti-vampire ritual. She had died during the plague. She wasn't a vampire, but a victim of a disease nobody understood. Let's go deeper. Some of the most famous vampire traits are actually symptoms of real diseases. Take rabies. The disease makes people sensitive to light, aggressive, and prone to biting. In the 18th century, rabies outbreaks in Eastern Europe coincided with vampire panics. Or porphyria, a blood disorder that causes severe sensitivity to sunlight. Sufferers develop blisters, pale skin, and receding gums. Tuberculosis, the consumption, was also blamed on vampires. In 19th century New England, families believed that a dead relative was consuming the living from beyond the grave. They would dig up the body, burn the heart, and feed the ashes to the sick person. They weren't crazy, but desperate to end the fear. But here's the darkest part. The vampire myth wasn't just about explaining death, it was about control. When a community was struck by disease, they needed someone to blame. They couldn't blame germs, they didn't know germs existed, so they blamed the dead. They exhumed bodies, they staked hearts, they burned villages, and sometimes they killed the living. In some cultures, anyone who died suspiciously, suicides, murder victims, people with deformities, was at risk of becoming a vampire. Their families would mutilate the body just in case. Fear of vampires wasn't just folklore, it was a weapon, a way to enforce social norms, a way to control the living by controlling the dead. So why did ancient people believe in vampires? Not because they were stupid, because they were human. They saw death, they saw disease, they saw suffering, and they needed answers. They didn't have microscopes, they didn't have germ theory, they didn't have modern medicine. All they had was observation, and what they observed was that the dead could still harm the living. It wasn't true, but it was logical. The vampire myth is one of the oldest and most persistent stories in human history. It appears in nearly every culture, on every continent. It has survived for thousands of years, and it probably will survive forever, because the fear it represents, fear of death, fear of disease, fear of the unknown, will never go away. We have science to explain the things our ancestors couldn't, but we still tell vampire stories, we still watch vampire movies, we still feel that chill when we're alone in the dark, because deep down, we still wonder, what if the dead aren't really dead? What if they're just waiting?